This is what we're going for. This is going to be, you know, your finished version will look a little bit different. Obviously, you can use your own pictures. Your layout could be different in how you adjust the images. So we just want to have it kind of have some movement to it. We want kind of cinematic kind of look to it. And your starting point's going to be with selecting three different people. So just a quick review, what you want to do is we got a couple of selection tools to choose from. Typically, you're going to start with the object selection tool and just make sure that's set to lasso. You can just click and drag a freehand box or freehand shape around your character. It will do its best to auto select it. You'll probably switch over to the quick selection from there and touch up any areas. Remember, by default, it should be set to add to a selection. If you want to subtract from a selection, you would hold down Alt Option, and then your cursor will change. To a subtraction, and then you can remove from the selection. And to do your detail work, you're probably going to use the polygon lasso tool. Again, just make sure that this button here is selected because this will add it to the current selection. Otherwise, it will create a whole new selection. Once you have your character outline, you're going to want to add a mask to this, and you'll just click that button, and that adds that second thumbnail there. Remember, black hides things, white reveals things. Once we have an initial selection made, you can come back with your brush tool, use white to reveal anything that you need to reveal, use black to hide anything else. Especially with hair, you could use this and maybe just use a soft brush. You could lower the opacity to kind of just blend the hair in with the background later. So make your selections. You're going to put them all into one document, and then we're going to pick up with the rest of the design. And now we're going to, once we have these selected, we can we want to play with the color tones a little bit. So select the thumbnail here. Image adjustments, these are all your options. For every image it's going to be different, but basically what we're looking for is to add some depth to this. So I'm going to go to shadows highlights for a starting point, and like I said, this is a little bit of trial and error. For every image it's going to be different, and you're going to play around with each image and see if again, we're just creating some depth here. Metallic texture next. I've just hidden my other layers. If you feel like you need to make any adjustments to those and edits to those objects, you can do that. But now I'm going to start working on the background. You can make this really however you want. I'm just going to kind of resize this to fit and increase maybe the size of the texture here. Once I have this resized, I'm going to go to image adjustments, and I'm just going to kind of play around again with shadow highlights. And we're just looking to maybe make this be a little bit more creative with it. Kind of brighten it up a bit, and I think that's going to be fine. All right, so the next thing we're going to do is add in our cloud texture. I like that. We probably want the dark part at the bottom. I bet that's going to look the best. I'm going to change the opacity of this. And All right, and we'll use a couple of adjustment layers. So again, these are the circle down at the bottom of the layers panel. We're going to use that. We're going to go to vibrance. And maybe some. All right, so we'll try those settings. If we right click and create clipping mask, it will apply it to just that layer below it. And we're going to create another one for curves. And again, this is not an exact science. We are just doing what we think looks good. And we'll clip that as well. So if you toggle those on and off, you'll kind of see what they do. The layer, I'm going to place this right above the curves. This would help if you turn your other the people on the people layers. I'm just going to call this highlight, and I'm going to switch to my brush tool. I'm going to make it really big. And make sure it's soft. We want a soft brush. And I'm going to use white. And so what we can do is just start clicking and kind of just making a focal point here. Okay, so I'm going to take and import this fire image in here. We want to layer this in a way so that way the main subject is on the bottom, and then we have this fire layer between that subject and the others. And I'm just going to resize this, and if you want, you can just kind of rotate it for make it a little different. And we want it to go past the bottom edge, so that's going to be important. And from here we just want to add a layer mask to this, and any way you know how. Okay, I'm going to use a brush and a layer mask, but we want to soften these edges, this edge specifically. Okay, so next I'm going to bring in this sunset, and I'm going to place this in the layer below it. And again, just kind of resize it. We want that kind of horizon. And using our layer mask, we're going to apply another layer mask to that, and we're just going to blend this in. You might need to go back to the fire and just continue to blend. And we might need to go back and forth a little bit as we progress, but I think this could be a good good starting point. Now is I'm going to add a gradient. This is going to be a fade from black to transparent. I'm going to put this at the top, just an empty layer for now. I'm going to switch to the gradient tool, and we want a black to transparent gradient that is hopefully set up by default. You can adjust that if needed. And if you remember how this tool works, we're going to click at where we want it to start and drag up. If you hold shift, you'll get a nice straight line. You might need to do this a few times to get it to how you like it. Remember, the longer the line is, the more gradual the fade. So I think I want something like that to start. And again, we can always come back and tweak these things. So I'm going to select from the gradient down to the sunset. All right, so this includes your two front characters. And I'm going to right click and create clipping mask. All right, so that clips it to our main image here, our focal point. All right, what I'm going to do next, hold Shift and Command and click on my other thumbnails of my other two subjects. What this will do is load those selections, and I can come back to this main layer mask and just make sure that they're filled with white. Alright, so we're going to do some cleanup to this. So one thing with this gradient that's definitely too strong, so I'm just going to lower the opacity a little bit on that. I'm also looking at the sunset that's going up too high. I want to lower that. I also want to lower the fire. So now what we want to do, I'm going to go back to this main mask, and in fact I'm going to rename that main, and I'm going to switch to my brush, and I'm going to switch to a we have these different categories of brushes. I'm going to go switch to a dry media brush. So if you want, you can collapse these general brushes, and it should be the next one under there. And if you increase the size, you can get a better idea of what this is going to do. And so we're going to, again, on this layer mask, we're going to use white to reveal and just kind of create kind of a little movement effect, I suppose. And you can rotate this just to get different looks, make it look more organic. Different sizes. You can experiment with different brushes as well. Alright, so you don't need to get too carried away with this right now, because once we start adding in some flames, you're probably going to want to come back and touch this up, and you might even erase some of this. Alright, so I'm going to bring in the flames and place this in the top layer. I'm going to change this blend mode to screen, and it should get rid of the black. And you can resize this, and we're going to make a bunch of copies. You can skew this if you want, just because it's fire. And again, we wanted to kind of add some movement to it. You're going to apply layer masks to these and just blend them in. Remember to adjust the opacity of your brush when you're doing this. You might need to switch back to your soft brush. I'm going to kind of skip ahead. I'm going to add in all my flames. Again, you might have multiple layers of this. You might need to go back and adjust some of these layer masks on the main to maybe you want more of this kind of fire in the background, maybe you want less. You just got to play around with it. So here's what I ended up doing with my flames. You can see I've made multiple layers, just kind of positioned them differently, kind of try to stretch it out a bit more to give it kind of some movement. I took one layer and put it vertically and just spread it out over the whole thing, and my goal here was just to keep the sparks and nothing else. Gonna see how that looks. We'll find out. So at this point, what we're gonna do, we're going to select the top layer, and we got to do this crazy keyboard shortcut to take a screenshot, basically of this point. All right, so we're gonna do this thing. Command, Alt, Shift, and the letter E. So again, Command, Alt, Shift, and the letter E. What that does is it puts everything into one layer. All right, so now from here, what we can do is just a few more effects we can apply to that need to be applied to the whole layer. So something that we never did last year, and this is kind of cool. So go up to Filter, and you should see Camera Raw Filter. I'm going to select that. Okay, so it opens up this panel here, and we're looking for this little icon. Okay, for 3 squares and a little magnifying glass. I'm going to click that, and it gives us some pre-made profiles to use from. I'm going to go down and open up the modern, and if you hover over one, you'll see how it's going to apply it. So this is going to be nice because it kind of gives it a clean, consistent color profile, and so that's what we're looking for. Really, any one of these will work. You're looking to just use your best judgment, because everybody's design is going to be a little bit different. All right, I'm going to pick modern number 9. Again, you can go with anything you think looks good. I'm going to select that. Then I'm going to hit the back button here. And we're going to go back to some of these options. I'm going to open up basic, and we can play around with some of these. So I'm going to try increasing maybe the contrast. Okay, so some of the settings that I adjusted on mine: contrast, highlight, shadows, this clarity seemed to make a big difference. Kind of played around with the vibrance a little bit. I'm guessing probably on yours it'll be fairly similar. Your settings do not need to be the exact same as mine. In fact, if they were, it probably wouldn't look good. So just keep that in mind. So we're going to minimize that, and the next thing we're going to go to is we're going to scroll down to detail, and we're just going to kind of adjust these, and again, we're just looking for something kind of interesting. And when you're happy with it, we can now click OK, and that will exit us from the Camera Raw. So from here, I want to import this texture. I'm calling it Scratches. We're going to bring this in, and again, we're going to change the blend mode to screen. And the whole purpose of this is again just to give it some movement. So resize, position it to what you think looks good. We're going to want to probably lower the opacity just a little bit, and you'll probably want to add a layer mask here. And we don't necessarily want this to scratch up like faces and the subjects, so probably just kind of hide those areas a little bit. Again, doesn't need to be perfect. And the last thing we're going to do is add some text. So switch your text tool, click and drag a box. Remember, for design, you'll hear me say this throughout the year, contrast is good, so even with our text. So I'd start off with maybe some black font, maybe something bold. And what I'm going to end up doing is probably 3 separate text boxes. And we're going to do Forged by Fire. All right, where you position your text is really up to you, because again, everybody's picture is going to look different. So it's just kind of what you think looks good. To make life easy, I'm going to put these 3 text boxes into a folder. All right, and the last thing that I want to do is just put a frame around this. So I'm just going to create a new layer, call it frame, and we can just fill this with black. So one way to do that, edit, fill, and then you can pick your color. Keyboard shortcut, Option, delete, paste your foreground color in there. Command, delete, fills it with your background color. So those are 2 keyboard shortcuts. What I'm going to do now is Command click this thumbnail to load the selection. Go to Select, Modify, Contract, and depending on the size of your document, this is going to be different for everyone. So I'm going to start with 50. I'm going to see how that looks. Okay, that'll be a good frame. So now I can just press delete and then deselect. And there we go. There's the finished, this finished design.